us into the world of Peter, a shy and reserved young boy who shares a home with his parents, Mark and Carol. One evening, as Peter rests in the comfort of his bedroom, a sudden noise disrupts the silence, jolting him awake. He searches the room for the source of the disturbance but finds nothing out of place. Despite trying to dismiss the incident and return to sleep, the mysterious noise persists, growing louder and more insistent. Filled with apprehension, Peter flicks on the lights, and to his bewilderment, the noise appears to emerge from behind the walls. Driven by a mix of curiosity and fear, he approaches the wall and tentatively knocks, only to receive a knock in return. Overcome with terror, Peter rushes to inform his mother of the eerie occurrence. Together, they inspect his room, yet the noise remains elusive to his mother's ears. As daylight breaks, the story reveals the daily struggles Peter faces at school, where he is mercilessly bullied by his peers. The arrival of a new substitute teacher, Miss Devine, introduces a brief break from his torment. During a recess, Peter chooses the safety of the indoors over the playground, where bullies lie in wait. Miss Devine, with her gentle manner, recognizes Peter's need for refuge and allows him to stay behind, assisting her in covering the classroom with decorations. That night, as Peter goes to sleep, an even more bizarre phenomenon unfolds. A thud against the wall is followed by a disembodied voice that whispers his name, pleading with him to keep silent about its presence. Panic-stricken, Peter defies the voice's request and calls his father, Mark. Upon hearing his son's account, Mark conducts a thorough search but hears nothing. Rationalizing it as the sound of rats, Mark decides to take action the next morning. Father and son head to the shed in search of rat poison, determined to put an end to the unsettling sounds. Back at school, Miss Devine's attention is caught by one of Peter's drawings, markedly different from the typical Halloween-themed artwork of his classmates. The drawing, depicting a child pleading for help in a black room, signals to Miss Devine that something is amiss. Her concern grows, prompting her to make a visit to Peter's residence. Upon meeting Carol, Miss Devine expresses her observations, pointing out Peter's unique and possibly indicative artwork. Carol dismisses the implication with a mix of embarrassment and denial, attributing it to Peter's vivid imagination, unaware of the strange events unfolding within the walls of their home. Later that night, Peter is roused from his sleep, accompanied by a voice softly calling out his name. The voice extends an offer of friendship to the lonely boy, promising to depart if her company is unwanted. With no friends to call his own, Peter is drawn to the idea of this mysterious companionship and invites the voice to stay. Shifts to the classroom where Peter is diligently working on a Halloween craft, carving a pumpkin with care. His efforts catch the eye of Miss Devine, who expresses her admiration for his work, declaring it her favorite amongst the class projects. However, this moment of pride quickly sours as Brian, a classmate harboring envy, overhears the praise. In a fit of jealousy, he confronts Peter during recess, knocking him to the ground and destroying the pumpkin that had earned him the teacher's credit. Later, at the sanctuary of his room, the voice behind the wall inquires about Peter's tears. In a moment of vulnerability, Peter confides about the bullying he endures at the hands of Brian. The voice counsels Peter on the importance of standing up for himself, planting the seeds of retaliation in his mind. The following day, to Peter's surprise, Brian enters the classroom bearing his own pumpkin and offers an apology for his previous cruelty. Despite the apology, the whispering voice continues to fuel Peter's newfound boldness, suggesting he should instill fear in Brian. Peter then confronts Brian and, in a misguided attempt at empowerment, pushes him down a staircase. The consequence is immediate and dire. Brian lies at the bottom of the stairs with a broken leg. The incident spirals into a serious chaos for Peter, leading to the possibility of his expulsion. Back at home, amidst the turmoil, Peter's father, Mark, grounds him. As they lock him away and, in a misguided attempt at empowerment, pushes him down a staircase. The consequence is immediate and dire. Brian lies at the bottom of the stairs with a broken leg. The incident spirals into a serious chaos for Peter, leading to the possibility of his expulsion. Back at home, amidst the turmoil, Peter's father, Mark, grounds him. As they lock him away, Carol assures him that this harsh measure is born from love, leaving Peter isolated with the chilling reality of his situation and the haunting presence that lingers just beyond the wall. Following his ejection from school, the caring substitute teacher, Miss Devine, decides it's time to check on Peter again. Before she leaves, she jots down her phone number on the back of Peter's math quiz, hoping it might be of some comfort to him. With the quiz in hand, she makes her way to Peter's home. Mark answers the door and, with a polite welcome, ushers her inside. During their conversation, Devine gently probes about Peter's future education. Mark explains that they've decided to homeschool Peter. With this news, Devine, sensing she may be overstepping, takes her leave. As dusk turns to dark, Carol, with a warm and comforting presence, presents Peter with some homemade pumpkin pies, signaling an end to his confinement in the basement. Later that night, drawn by a mix of curiosity and hope, Peter returns to the wall and initiates contact with the mysterious voice. The voice responds, and Peter confides in her about his time spent locked away. The voice urges Peter to be wary of his parents, hinting that they may not be the people he believes them to be. Peter then expresses a craving to meet her. The voice hesitates, cautioning that her appearance, altered by a long entrapment, might not be pleasant to him. She then entrusts Peter with a secret. Behind the wallpaper lies a hole. Guided by her words, Peter discovers the concealed opening. It is through this revelation that the voice identifies herself as Sarah, Peter's sister. Sarah shares her grim story, explaining that she has been biding her time, waiting for Peter to grow strong enough to move the clock that hides the door to her shadowy prison. She warns Peter of the impending danger, suggesting that their parents harbor a malevolent nature and that his time to act is drawing near. As the tale takes a darker twist, Sarah confesses that it was on Halloween when they sealed her fate behind the wall. Resolute and spurred by a newfound courage, Peter assures her that he will free her, convinced that Miss Devine could be their ally. With a plan in mind, Peter stealthily makes his way to his parents' room to use the phone, his fingers dialing Miss Devine's number with a mix of desperation and hope. But before he can utter a word to his would-be rescuer, a noise jolts him from his mission, and he spins around to find his mother, Carol, standing behind him. Turning to Peter with a stern expression, she criticizes him for trying to communicate with someone outside of their home, shepherding him back to his room while expressing her disappointment in his actions. But it's then that she notices the sign of Peter's secret, the torn wallpaper. Her eyes widen as she peers into the hole behind it, and a wave of fear washes over her. With a shaky voice, she warns Peter that any consequences now are a result of his own doing. As night replaces the day, Sarah's voice whispers through the walls, imparting a dire piece of advice to Peter. She insists that he must confront the situation with his parents, else he falls victim to the same dark fate she endured. The evening continues, and dinner is served. Mark comments casually on the soup, but Carol. It's at this point that Mark's suspicion is piqued. He notes the open shed door and Peter's untouched meal. Pressing Peter for answers, Mark's frustration mounts when met with silence. Peter breaks the tense silence with a bombshell, accusing Mark of harming his sister. The revelation sends a ripple of shock through his parents, and the truth dawns on Mark. Peter has laced their dinner with rat poison. As Mark's body is racked with pain, he urges Carol to dial emergency services, only to discover the phone line has been severed. In the ensuing turmoil, Mark dies to the poison's fatal grasp. Carol, reeling from the horror of what her son has done, lunges for a knife and pursues Peter up the stairs. But the poison coursing through her system rapidly takes effect, and in a grisly turn of events, she collapses, inadvertently impaling herself with the blade. Peter, seizing the moment to escape, aims to retrieve the keys from his mother, but even as she lays wounded, Carol grasps at his leg, mustering a final warning. Don't let her out. Peter dismisses her plea and turns away, driven by a resolve to reach his sister. Back in his room, Peter stands before the clock that conceals the hidden door, keys in hand. He relays to Sarah that he has the means to free her. Her voice, muffled by the barrier between them, instructs him to move the clock. With a mix of anxiety and determination, Peter sets his hand on the clock, ready to unveil the truths that lie in the shadows of the wall. Peter, with his heart pounding in his chest, pushes against the heavy clock. With a thud, it topples and crashes to the floor, shattering into pieces and revealing a concealed hatch. From within the wall, Sarah's voice tells him to proceed. The hatch door groans on its hinges as it opens, and from the shadows, Sarah emerges, her form disturbingly unhuman. As she steps into the room, Peter, overwhelmed by fear, dashes into an adjoining room for safety. Sarah, with her strange and unsettling presence, approaches Peter's room. She touches the door, her voice seeping through the cracks as she asks Peter about the experience of witnessing his parents' death. In the midst of this eerie confrontation, the doorbell rings, and the creature that was once Sarah withdraws. Outside, Brian stands with his cousin, fueled by a desire for retribution against Peter. The door mysteriously swings open before them, and they step into the house, intent on finding Peter, who is concealed under his bed, trembling with fear. Inside the house, chaos ensues. One cousin enters Peter's sanctuary, while the others lay waste to the surroundings. Brian, caught in the turmoil, stumbles and falls. Another cousin, after destroying the piano, hears a chilling sound and notices strands of hair cascading down from the damaged instrument. In a terrifying moment, Sarah pounces, her actions lethal. Meanwhile, in Peter's room, the cousin spots Peter's hiding place under the bed. But before he can react, a call from his brother diverts his attention, and he rushes out. Elsewhere, Brian is frozen in horror at the sight of Carol's motionless form. His panic escalates as doors slam shut by unseen forces, and another cousin is violently dragged away by Sarah, his cries for help echoing in the house. One by one, Sarah kills the boys with ruthless efficiency until only Brian remains. Spiders, as if summoned by Sarah's will, descend upon him, and he is confronted by the horrifying look of Sarah, who moves to end his life. Cut to another scene where Miss Divine, driven by a sense of danger, is on her way to Peter's house. Back inside, Peter witnesses the aftermath of Sarah's deeds, a decapitated body. Sarah then exits the room, her movements unnatural as she crawls towards him. She speaks of the past, of his birth filled with joy, and her own, met with screams of terror. She reveals the dark truth of her existence, that their father, repulsed by her, condemned her to a life of darkness, confining her within a cage hidden behind the wall. Peter's life had been one of comfort and warmth in his bed, while Sarah's existence was one of misery and survival among the cobwebs and rats in the shadows. She had adapted to her grim surroundings, mastering the art of navigating the darkness, learning the harsh ways of self-defense, and manipulating events to her will. Now, with a grim sense of retribution, she drags Peter away and imprisons him in the very space that had been her cell for so long. The scene shifts to Miss Divine, who arrives at the silent and open-doored Peter's house. Inside, the eerie cries and the sight of a shadow lurking in the kitchen greet her. The house is a scene of havoc, prompting her to attempt a call to emergency services. But her effort is cut short as she stumbles upon Sarah's unmistakable hair and feels a sharp scratch on her leg. In the horror that unfolds, she discovers the lifeless body of Brian's cousin. Sarah then advances towards Divine, who desperately tries to escape, only to realize she's trapped as the door refuses to open. Amidst the fear and chaos, Peter's voice pierces through, urging Divine to escape. Driven by a fierce determination to save the boy, Divine makes her way to Peter's room. With adrenaline-fueled strength, she breaks through the wall. Together, they attempt to flee the cursed house, but as Divine reaches the safety of the outside, Peter is pulled back into the depths of the home. When Peter regains consciousness, he finds himself in an underground chamber, the room of Sarah. As she crawls towards him, Peter's fear is replaced by a need to understand her motives. Sarah confesses, revealing the harsh reality of her existence. She was the unwanted child, the monster nobody could love. The climax intensifies as Miss Divine returns, searching for Peter. Sarah, with her animalistic instincts, lunges at Divine. Peter, in emotion, grasps Sarah's long hair and pulls himself out of the basement pit. Divine takes this chance to strike back, wielding a rod against Sarah with full force. The struggle ends with Sarah tumbling back into the depths from which she emerged. With no time to spare, Peter secures the hatch, sealing Sarah within. The movie concludes with this act of closure, leaving